Welcome back to the VarsityWA Midweek Podcast. I'm your host, Todd Milles, and we are already in week 4 of the Washington High School football season. We'll go back around the state, this time to Yakima, with former Yakima Herald-Republic sports editor Jerrel Swenning to talk about the 4A CBBN, the 2A CWAC, and the 1A SCAC, including the big Royal Kashmir Showdown in 2 weeks. And also returning is our weekly guest, Matt Evans, the computer rankings guru from Tri-Cities of Evans Rankings. We will break down a few of the games of the week, including the 3A Metro Showdown between number 1 and defending state champion O'Day hosting Eastside Catholic at West Seattle Stadium on Friday night. We're going around the horn again, going around the state to different cities, talking to people in the know about possible league and playoff contenders. And man, this guy, I like him, A, because he's a Coug, but B, he's an old newspaper guy from the Yakima Herald-Republic. Jerrel Swenning joining us to talk some CBBN and some CWAC, some Royal and Kashmir. But I wanted to start by letting him kind of discuss what he's doing. He's kind of doing sort of the same thing that Lauren and I are doing by starting our own website. And he's got a great website going on. Jerrel, kind of explain exactly what your website's designed to do, the name, and some of the other goodies for people to know.
Yeah, Todd, thanks. About 3 or 4 years ago, after I left the Herald-Republic, I got into doing stats, falling in the Google Sheet rabbit hole and all that. And as sources for information continue to dwindle, I thought, why not build this out to a website? So I spent a good chunk of the summer diving into that. It's called StatHoundMedia.com. We'll be covering the Big Nine, CBBN, the CWAC, and the SCAC, because there's really been no outlets that have covered the entire leagues. You've had chunks, the Wenatchee World covering Eastmont, Wenatchee, Yakima covering, West Valley, Ike, Davis, and Moses Lake, kind of Columbia Basin, Herald, but nobody's really captured everything. Will it have as in-depth as some of those papers? Maybe not, but it'll cover everything. I've been doing the stats for the SCAC and the Big Nine for the past few years, so there's a built-in audience there. I'm going to start getting out to the schools, meeting the ADs that I don't know. Just getting it in front of the people is the part that, once that happens a lot, then it'll start clicking. But it's been fun. It's been really receptive, especially the places, Royal, Kashmir, where their coverage isn't what, other places might have. And people, have seen their coverage dwindle, unfortunately. And you and I both know what it was like to either have friends or yourself or, your name in the paper, seeing a picture of some athletic accomplishment. And that just doesn't happen anymore. So I'm trying to build that out. It's going good. So far, it's a slow build, as I'm sure you're seeing. It's just, getting it in front of people's the key. Once you do that, then it starts to snowball.
And Lauren and I are planning on seeing Jerrel here in a couple of weeks when Kashmir and Royal, number 1 and number 2 in the state in 1A, meet in the SCAC Showdown. Looking forward to seeing my friend Jerrel. And let's kind of jump right into the CBBN, and not only a team that I think has a real chance to win a state playoff game this year. I know they haven't gotten over that hump recently, but not only are they a good team, they have maybe the best individual story going on in the state right now, Jerrel, and in Brady J, the quarterback at Moses Lake, 1,352 passing yards, 21 touchdowns in 3 games. It's been a while. I mean, I know when Sam Heward was at Kennedy Catholic, we talked about some single season stuff. Obviously, Sam Heward has the career passing record, and but 4,600 yards, 67 touchdowns from Kellen Moore at Prosser. Both you and I remember those days, and Brady J has a legitimate chance to go after those records. And obviously, the longer they go in the season, the better his odds are. But let's talk about him and Moses Lake and they're throwing a lot, and he's also become sort of the semblance of their run game. What are you expecting from this offense as we move forward into some more important games in the league?
The regular season, I see much of the same. I mean, the big threat to them, they just beat Sunnyside, who I would think is probably the third best team in the league. And so they have Eastmont, which is just the opposite of them almost. They run the heck out of the ball and throw it, a dozen times a game. So I think league wise, they should go through it unscathed. Um, Injuries are one thing, they could pop up, but I think if they keep Brady upright, they stand a chance of hitting 10-0 and or 9-0 and then going into those crossovers. And that's where, we'll see, because I know Coach Jay is a big Mike Leach fan, and you and I being Cougs, Mike Leach was great, but it's when you keep throwing it, and they're having like 6 or 7 carries a game, and most of those are by Brady. What happens when a defense drops 7 and makes them tempts them to run rather than throwing it over them? I mean, the Big Nine, West Valley lost its top running back to a hamstring injury. He might come back, Devin Enciso. It's kind of give and take. He's had problems with it before, and we know hamstrings can nag the whole year. Sunnyside has a new quarterback who's doing well, but they lost to Moses Lake fairly handily, and they play Eastmont this Friday, so they get back to back, and we'll see where they are. Ike's really down. Davis lost Lance McGee, and I mean they're putting up decent numbers, but with them it's always depth and having 7 linemen to play both offense and defense. So I would think that matchup later in October with Eastmont and Moses Lake will decide the league. And right now, I would think that Moses Lake again, like last year, would be a heavy favorite.
How legitimate do you think Brady J's record watch is on the single season passing touchdown records?
If they keep passing like this, I think single season is very reachable. I obviously had a pretty close look at what Kellen Moore and his dad Tom were doing down in Prosser. I talked to Brady, and he kind of reminded me a little of Kellen in that he was real. He wasn't, not arrogant or anything, but real cerebral when you talk to him. We had a photo shoot with Kellen for the cover of our football tab, and it was a poker theme, and we wanted, it was what's the deal, because it was when they realigned in 2000, I think 6, and he just wasn't very demonstrative and said, well, do something, Kellen. What if Kirby runs the wrong route? How would you react? And expecting a scowl or something. He just goes, improvise. And so I think Brady might, Kellen's just real cerebral like that, and Brady struck me a little like that. Rather than you've probably talked to athletes that are their own number one fan, and Brady and coach his dad don't strike me like that. But as far as the record, I think they got a shot if they keep throwing like this. Again, my concern is when you get to week 10, week 11, when you're seeing defenses and they've ran into 2 mid-Columbia teams that will, drop the defense and say, okay, here you go. You're going to, you dink and dunk all the way. You're going to hand it off. You're not going to throw over us. So, but, they can average 400 or 500 yards passing through the Big Nine. I don't think if they want to, I don't think that's a big concern.
I had one Kinko coach that saw them already this season, thought that Moses Lake, this was the team that was going to get to at least the state quarterfinals. And if he's getting to in a week 11, or maybe, dare I say, a week 12 game, I think that record is in real danger given what's gone on so far early in the season. So let's get to a league that I think is back on the rise, a little uptick in depth. The 2A CWAC, and let's start with East Valley of Yakima with all those seniors. Braden Albrecht, Jackson Berg, Grayson Stevens, a really good offensive line. Eric Berg, the coach, just won a kind of a slobber knocker with perennial league contender Prosser last week. What's the ceiling here for East Valley in a year that there's heavy expectations?
I would think quarterfinals. I mean, they got to the opening round last year. Franklin Pierce got them, but what struck me about that game is they were putting up yardage, but they would stub their toe. And they have defensively a couple studs. A kid named Zaliah Wade, who's about 6'5", 250. Going into that game, you're expecting, Albright, Berg, Stevens put up big numbers, and they put up decent numbers. But that kid was all over the field. They were lining him up on the right edge, left edge. He went against the Josiah West, the Montana recruit, and he was pushing him back. And he had a couple sacks, few tackles for loss, and was just flying around. He was a problem for Prosser. So with that, they have some depth on the line. Defensively, they have another kid named Cody Gasling, who came over from SELA. Real good linebacker. Back end, they're strong. So as much as the offense puts up those big numbers, their defense is really tough. I mean, Prosser, it isn't what Prosser's been, but it's still a good Prosser team, and they held them to 7 points. And that came after a 60-yard pass to set that up. East Valley is, they still have Othello coming up. They still have SELA coming up. But, I think they have a shot to go to the quarterfinals or, depending on matchups and how the, turnovers go, semifinals.
Any of the other CWAC teams, Prosser, Othello, who's had a nice run getting to the state playoffs. You mentioned SELA, Ephrata. Any of those teams you think round of 16, possible round of 8 teams in the state playoffs?
I would definitely put Othello there. Coach Hoyle does a great job every year there. And it always surprises me when, you do the football preview and you look at the size of the school, how big Othello is. Othello is a big school for a 2A. So, they have the numbers. Prosser's numbers are getting back up. I know they're still pretty young. They had a couple injuries for that East Valley game, but if they stay healthy, they could, get to the 16. And SELA's kind of the wild card. They really, they beat Ellensburg in Ellensburg, which several years ago would be, wow, that's a win to hang your hat on. But Ellensburg's really down now. But Coach Greg Hayes, second year with the Vikings, has really got that program headed on the upward. Good skill guys, little small on the line, so it'll be interesting to see what they do against an Othello, which always has the big lineman, or East Valley. But they could, I think those 4 teams, East Valley, Othello, SELA, and Prosser, will be the round of 32, and we'll see, just depends on matchups how it goes. Ephrata could be a spoiler in there. They got their quarterback back from last year, and they played Prosser really well, lost by a point. Toppenish, I thought, could be another spoiler. They lost their quarterback, Jason Sanchez, to what I heard was just a really gruesome dislocated hip injury where they had to take him off the ambulance. No surgery was required, but his not only football season is over, but basketball and track are in doubt. But I would say those 4 teams are the teams that could make up a quarter of the round of 16 if things go their way. But I would expect probably 2 or 3 of them to get to 16.
Well, let's talk about I think what's the premier small school matchup in the regular season in the SCAC in a couple of weeks here. Number 2 Kashmir at number 1 Royal, the 5-time defending state 1A champs. Both teams played twice last year. Royal, competitive in both games in the early going before Royal kind of found that gear with Lance Allred, and pulled away. Kashmir returns a lot of that offense back, whereas Royal had to reload a few of those skill position guys minus Shea Stevenson. I know you're looking forward to that game. Is this the year that you think Royal is vulnerable, and is Kashmir? Are they the most, I don't know, sensible team? If somebody's going to go and beat them, it's the Bulldogs.
Well, first off, you have to know them, and Kashmir definitely knows them. Played them, like you said, twice last year. They're not too far apart geographically. And Kashmir, when I told you I was thinking about it, and you said, "Yeah, I don't know if you could pick against Royal." It's like the old Tom Moore days. Do you pick against Prosser? Well, fellow looks good. You just can't do it. If there's a year that SCAC team's going to get them, it's this year with what Coach Bremer has with the Bulldogs. I mean, you skill position line with Prin Fox leading the way. I mean, they have so much, but again, it's Royal, and how many touchdowns is that mystique worth? They did replace a lot, but it's as I always say, if you're going against the Lance Allreds and all those guys every day in practice, you're going to do one of two things: you're either going to get better or you're going to quit, because it's just not worth it. And those guys get better. They have the lefty at quarterback, Grant Wardener, Shea Stevenson, and some other guys it's hard to tell who the stars are, because Wiley is good about rotating guys. He'll about 8 guys will carry the ball, 7 guys will catch a ball, 2 or 3 guys will throw a ball. So it's everybody gets to play in that system, and I'm really looking forward to it. Last year Kashmir hung early, and then Lance Allred took over, and that kid was special, both throwing and especially running. Wardenar is a great athlete, but he doesn't have the wheels that Lance Allred had. So we'll see. I definitely think if it could be the first of 2 matchups like it was last year, where they meet deep in the playoffs again. The rest of the league, it's 1, 2, and then a drop off to Zilla, and Connell not too far. I mean, I know that you might talk to a coach and say, well, we think we can, and you're like, hey, Kashmir and Royal are just on a different level, especially this year for Kashmir with all they have back and with what Royal does every darn year.
Yeah, neither team has been tested at all through 3 games, so they've gotten a lot of rest. Their starting lineup, I assume that both teams will be playing their starters for 4 full quarters here a couple weeks in Royal City. Well, Jerrel Swenning, thanks for joining the VarsityWA podcast to talk about the 4A CBBN, the 2A CWAC, the 1A SCAC, and do check out Jerrel Swenning's new website. It's even if you're a Stat Hound, get to Stat Hound Media and check out what's going on in those 3 leagues. He has everything up to date, thorough, professional, and he's a Coug. I think I mentioned that earlier. But thanks for joining us, Jerrel, and we'll
all right,
see
buddy.
you in 2 weeks and get caught up soon.
All right, see you in Royal.
Welcome back to the VarsityWA Midweek Podcast, our second segment. The guy we bring in every week to talk the week's best games, and Matt Evans from Evans Rankings. Check out his computer rankings on a weekly basis. He publishes those usually on Sunday nights before everybody else does, and he's gathering more data, so those rankings are being fine-tuned. And we're already week 4, Matt. I can't believe it. And we've got some good ones this week. Let's start in the Metro League. This is sort of the annual, where the rest of the country kind of sort of pays attention to Washington football game, with number 1 O'Day hosting number 2 Eastside Catholic in a game that usually decides the Metro League championship. What do you think of this game being played in West Seattle? O'Day's kind of dominated this game in the last couple of years with its physicality and been a little more efficient. Eastside Catholic has been sloppy with penalties, has gotten behind in both games the last couple of years, although in the state semifinals did have a really good shot of winning that game before seeing its heart broken on a last second scoring play. But what intrigues you about this particular chapter of Eastside Catholic O'Day?
I feel like for the first time in a handful of years that this is the most vulnerable O'Day's been in this matchup. I mean, we know that both of these teams are going to make the playoffs, because I think it's the top 4 of the Metro League are going to make it in. So we know both these teams are going to make the playoffs, but I feel like, Rainier Beach kind of, they showed a good game plan on how to keep O'Day intact and how to keep them, make them vulnerable. And Eastside Catholic is the most talented team other than O'Day in the Metro League. And I think that if anybody has the ability to jump out and give O'Day a second loss this year, this is the team to do it.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how much Dom Dasty, the head coach at Eastside Catholic, airs it out, tries to get some big play stuff down to Titan McNeil, the talented sophomore tight end, number one tight end recruit in the country. This O'Day secondary has been vulnerable the first couple weeks. Like you said, Graham Kapowsen and Rainier Beach both getting big pass plays. It's going to be curious. I'm curious to see what O'Day's health status is for, especially in the backfield for Friday night. We have not seen a lot of Hutton Leverett at quarterback. We've seen Elias Moimoy, who's done a really good job, Matt, as a ninth grader, just kind of keeping the fort down and a dual threat. He had a couple touchdown passes last week, but O'Day seems to find guys. A guy that will step forward like, Jay Sean Wilson, a sophomore who came on early in that Rainier Beach game, ran for 100 yards in week 2 and then backed it up with a career high 160 yards last week against Seattle Prep. So it could end up being dually backfields, Matt. I mean, Nick Jones is off to a fast start from Eastside Catholic, which had the week off last week. So they've had 2 weeks to prepare for this matchup. I kind of like Eastside Catholic coming to West Seattle Stadium on Friday night and getting the win. I think they're a little healthier. They're playing a lot more efficiently on offense than maybe I thought watching them in the offseason. And O'Day's still going to be down some guys, especially up front. It's just a matter of who they're going to find, who they're going to get back in their backfield. So, yeah, interesting game. The nation. If the nation's going to be paying attention to Washington, that's obviously the game they'll tune into.
And the other thing, too, to think about in this one, the winner of this one gets a leg up for a top 3 seed in 3A. There's a outside chance of a top 2, but having a possible home semifinal game is huge. So, yeah, stakes are absolutely through the roof for this game.
Let's go a couple games in the 2A ranks. And we talked about this on the Midnight Reactions podcast, where now we're starting to see the heavy hitters of the Northwest Conference 2A, where we're going to see them sort of take on one another here over the next few weeks. And it starts this weekend with Linden and Anacortes. What do you like in this matchup?
I love both of these teams. I think that the thing that's going to be interesting this year is, we've seen so much. Anacortes has lost so much talent this year due to graduation. They've had a couple of big wins with the Bainbridge win and with the Bellingham win, but Seaholm put up 33. I don't remember the last time, off the top of my head, I couldn't tell you the last time a team put up 33 points on Anacortes. And, Linden is, they've had some really tight games this year. That win over Franklin Pierce week 2, just a huge non-league one there. I think this game's going to come down to the last possession. And in all honesty, I'm going to go with the home team. I'm looking at Linden in this one.
Wow. Yeah, I really, what intrigues me about this is, can Linden's secondary limit the big pass plays? Ryan Harrington's been on fire. He's the guy. He's the guy of this offense. He doesn't have to worry about the Beaner brothers. He's passed for 915 yards and 11 touchdowns. And he's got Zeke Hawkins, who's really emerged as a sort of a jitterbug type yak receiver in space, and then Micah Dickinson at tight end, and then Luca Moore. He's their Division I recruit. That passing game is really, really dangerous. So can Linden's secondary, limit the big plays? And then on the flip side, how will Anacortes match up with Linden up front and Max Asink in the run game? And I know that Linden's not going to want to get into a game that we see in the 30s and 40s. I know they're going to want to control tempo, control clock, but still run their offense. And what was encouraging also last week, Matt, is they got Lucas Lige back at quarterback at Linden. He'd missed the first 2 games with, I think, an injury. But to get him back as part of their quarterback platoon, a good athlete, can run and pass as a dual threat, I think adds another dimension to this Linden offense. I get it. Linden's at home. They're tough at home. I'm not picking against the two-time defending state champions. I like Anacortes in this game, but I like you. I think it's going to come down to the fourth quarter and maybe the final possession.
Yeah, and you got to be careful picking against Anacortes. They're going to put it up in the weight room, so I'm ready for the hate next week if they pull out the win.
We will not give Justin Ports any fuel whatsoever this week on the VarsityWA midweek podcast. But maybe Blake Van Dalen and Linden, man. Although we're split on it, so maybe they'll both find fire on it. The last game I want to get to, and this might be kind of an underrated game, maybe sort of flying under the radar, but a matchup of two 3-0 teams in the 2A CWAC. I'm talking about Sela with Dylan Kingston at quarterback. He's really taken the Greg Hasty RPO offense to another level this fall. And then you have him going against 3-0 Othello. We all know about Othello. Big, strong Othello. RJ Guards, I think, is one of the best two-way players in the CWAC. He's a really good wide receiver. And they have Gavin Carl at running back. For those that thought there might be a drop-off at Othello, that really hasn't happened so far. But Sela coming in at 3-0 and being one of those, 3, 4, 5 teams knocking on the door for a playoff spot, maybe a little bit of a surprise, but good for the Vikes as they go to Huskyland. What do you think of this game?
Well, yeah, a huge win for Sela last week over West Valley of Yakima. I did not have that down on my radar at all. This week, the thing that's going to be really interesting about this game, in my opinion, is it like you said, it's kind of a sneaky good matchup with two undefeated teams. But for Othello, it's even more sneaky because next week they play in Moxie against East Valley. So can Othello, is Othello going to, do they overlook? Is this a trap game for them? I don't think it will be, but I mean, I think the game's probably going to be, I don't think it's going to be as close as some people might think, but there's always that thing in the back of your mind of, yes, this is a 3-0 team, but next week we've got the league championship game essentially. So can Othello keep their composure, keep their focus on the team that's on the field against them and not be caught looking ahead to next week?
Yeah, Othello's won five in a row in this series. Sela has not beaten the Huskies since 2018, but has a golden opportunity Friday to really kind of sneak into the league championship picture if they can knock off Othello at home. Well, that's it for this week in segment 2. I wanted to thank both Jerrel Swenning from the Yakima Herald-Republic and our weekly guest, Matt Evans from Evans Rankings, to talk about Week 4 Games of the Week. We will see you Friday night for Midnight Reactions. Appreciate you guys tuning in. This podcast is brought to you by Varsity Washington, your source for high school sports news, rankings, and more around the state of Washington. You can listen to new episodes of the VarsityWA Podcast weekly on YouTube, Spotify, or Apple Podcasts. And for more from VarsityWA, visit us at varsitywanews.com and subscribe for daily posts covering the high school sports landscape around the state. A special thank you to our guests on this episode and to Carl Johnson and Matt Bueller of the Portland-based band Edith and Axon for providing the music you hear at the beginning and end of this podcast each week. You can find the band on Instagram at Edith Axon Official. Thank you to our listeners for tuning in to the VarsityWA Podcast. For producer Lauren Smith, I'm your host, Todd Milles. We will be back next week.